I used to live in an abusive household. Here's how my life turned around for the better. Written by Fabianthewriter. Featuring Madam Raven. To put it bluntly, I grew up in an abusive household. I fondly remember the school nights when my mother and father would constantly argue over petty things like food, or more serious matters, like how my father would always be caught bringing another woman home. It stuck with me, as it would with any other 10-year-old. Other than that, I was pretty average. All I did was go to school and occasionally hang out with the neighborhood children. My father didn't care where or how long I stayed out, so long as he was able to bring in another woman while I wasn't around the house. It was always my mother who would come outside to tell me when dinner was ready. After being dropped off by my school bus one day, I entered my house, eager to read a history book given to me by my history teacher after I took an interest in his class. I sat down on the kitchen table and skimmed through the pages, deciding to admire the pictures of ancient civilizations before reading the text. That's when my father entered the household with my mother. They were arguing again, except this time, it was worse. My father slammed the table. He looked me dead in the eyes and pointed towards my room.
"Go to your fucking room,"
he shouted. I immediately got up, taking my book with me. My father violently grabbed my arm and with his other hand yanked the book from my hand. I continued my way towards the room, crying. I closed the door, but didn't lock it. I would receive a beating if I did so. As I lied down on the bed, I could hear and visualize my father's argument.
"He's never going to get pussy like this. This shit you teach him makes him a bitch,"
he shouted to my mother.
Okay, I'll straighten him up.
My mother responded like a soldier who blindly took orders from his general. I gasped as I lied on the bed. I knew pretending to sleep wasn't going to help. My anxiousness overtook me as I heard the footsteps from my mother trailing towards my room. But all of a sudden, the footsteps stopped.
Hello?
My mother asked quietly. But who was she talking to? I wondered. What followed afterwards was a blood-curdling scream from my mother. I expected it was my father hurting her, but I remember hearing my father sitting on the kitchen table as soon as my mother left to straighten me up. I jumped off the bed and hid under it. I could have sworn I stayed up until the morning, looking over my shoulder from under the bed. Throughout the whole night, I didn't hear a single thing from either my father or mother. The weirdest thing for me, however, was how the door never opened throughout my whole time being awake. I can't recollect my memory of how or why I eventually fell asleep, but suffice to say, despite the uncomfortable position and the dirty floor, I managed to fall asleep quickly. I woke up in a random room, and not some room you find in a horror movie. This was a very soothing and comfortable room, full of high-end furniture, complete with a buffet of food that was perfectly arranged in a table near my high-end bed. I didn't think much of it at first, due to my hunger, but as soon as I finished eating, I began to perceive my surroundings, questioning everything. Whoever kidnapped me seemed to know me better than I ever did. The food on the table consisted of mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, and a bottle of juice. This was my favorite thing to eat. I was wearing a Godzilla shirt, something that I had adored after being shown the movies at school. To top it off, I found glasses that perfectly fit me. I had very poor eyesight, but my parents never cared enough to prescribe glasses to me. However, despite my gratitude for all that I had been given at that point, there was one thing that truly freaked me out. How clean I was. Not only had I been lying on a dirty floor prior to waking up in the room, but my parents never really washed my clothes as much as they should have. My kidnapper went out of the way to make sure I not only had a comfortable night's sleep, but to nurture me upon arrival. After living so long with constant abuse, for once in my life, I felt love. I felt as if I could express myself freely without being tortured for it. That is why, without hesitation, I made my way toward the door situated on the corner of the room. I put on my new glasses enthusiastically. I was ecstatic to finally meet the people or the person who took it upon themselves to care for me when my own biological parents couldn't and wouldn't have. As soon as I stepped out the door, it was pitch black. I turned around towards the room again. The lights had shut off as soon as I opened the door. Even with my glasses, I couldn't make out much of what was outside. As soon as my eyesight adjusted, I noticed two people dressed in black robes. They both stood facing each other. They were very hard to see in the pitch black. It took me more than a few seconds to even notice they were there in the first place. Once my eyesight adjusted more, I noticed a chain of people dressed in black robes. All of them stood in a linear formation, facing each other with space set apart from me, as if they were guarding a path I was meant to walk. I took a step forward. The second my foot touched the dirt, the first two robed men uniformly followed my lead. They stood behind me. As I continued walking, the same process was repeated, except the other robed men walked behind each other. It felt as if I was a mother duck leading a group of ducklings, except I was being followed by robed men who were much taller and scarier looking than I would ever hope to be. I eventually reached a dead end. I could see the remaining robed men, all huddled up together, making a circle. As I approached them, they made an opening for me, moving uniformly. I stepped inside their massive man-made circle. As they closed off the opening, and again, it was pitch black in the center of the circle. A light shined. It was from a camera that was pointed at two people who were tied up by ropes and forced to stand. They were both bleeding and shivering to the core. I couldn't make out who they were at first, but after my eyesight adjusted as I got closer, I realized they were my parents. To be honest, I didn't gasp or cry. In fact, I was more confused at the what and the whys. An even bigger robed man appeared. He was walking alongside another member. I assumed this was the leader. I can't remember the exact details of his appearance, but he was way taller than the other members, whom were all, for some reason, uniform in height. They approached my parents. The leader stayed a few feet apart from my parents, while the associate stood beside my parents. The associate raised his hand towards me, and with a raspy yet soothing voice, spoke into my soul.
Master holds respect for you, since he was also a child of abuse. Seeing you grow up into the person you are today has inspired him to reach out to you.
I didn't know what to say, but he didn't seem to mind my quiet. So he continued.
You can choose to stay with us. We'll care for you while we train you to join in our cause. Or you can reject the offer, and we'll send you off to a nice and loving family, free of torment. However, what will not be subject to debate is that your parents will be harshly tortured and suffer a slow death.
I stood there again, not knowing how to respond.
You have a minute to decide whether or not you want to watch, to relieve some of the anger.
I stood there again. I pondered what to do. I counted the seconds as they passed. I shivered as I looked around, with a tear in my eye, afraid of responding.
Master likes you. Master thinks you have a big heart and that you will make a great parent someday. You're free to go.
It's been 10 years since the incident. I'm a 20-year-old college student, living with a family that cares for me. I had somehow forgotten about that night as the years passed. I experienced a love I could only dream of from parents I wasn't born into. I wasn't ridiculed for my love of nerdy things, and plus, I have a hot girlfriend. But that's besides the point. I am writing this because I took an interest in criminology. I was looking into a case that happened 10 years ago. It apparently shocked the whole country at the time. It took a while to sink in, but the details are as followed. A man was found on the outskirts of a highway. When the autopsy was done, it was reported his whole pelvis was cut off. A note that was taped to one of his protruding bones read, "If you can't take care of the children you bring into this cruel world, why spread your seed?" A woman was found lying next to the man with a bed sheet covering her whole body. The detectives had assumed they were somehow connected. What made it hard to identify her was that her whole head was missing from her body. A note on the top of her sawed-off neck read, "You had a choice to turn your kid's life around, and all you did was blindly follow the wrong path. You've lost your head, lady." I couldn't believe it, but at the same time, I was somehow appreciative. Before I finish writing this, I want to make a statement to every parent out there. Please take care of your children. Love them and teach them. Show them this world has some good in it. Either that or suffer a horrible death.